The sun beats down relentlessly on the dry plains of Italy. It is 216 BC, and the Roman Empire, once unshakable in its dominance, faces its darkest day. In the distance, a dark cloud of dust rises, signifying the approach of an army unlike any the Romans have ever faced. You can hear the pounding of hooves, the clinking of armor, and the faint murmur of thousands of men preparing for war. Yet, despite their numbers, the Romans are about to walk into a trap that will cost them everything. At the head of this Carthaginian force is Hannibal Barca, a name that has become synonymous with military genius. His army is a mix of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants, a testament to the diverse cultures of the Mediterranean at that time. Hannibal's gaze is fixed on the Roman camp, his mind already calculating moves that will ensure victory. But this battle is not just about brute force. It is a clash of ideologies, a fight for survival, and a testament to the human will to conquer. As the Roman legions emerge from their camp, the battle cry of the Carthaginians strikes fear into their hearts. With a roar that shakes the ground beneath their feet, the armies collide. Swords flash in the sunlight, the air is filled with the stench of sweat and blood, and the clash of steel on steel echoes across the plain. Despite being outnumbered, the Romans press their attack, their disciplined ranks and superior weaponry giving them the edge they need to hold their ground. The Carthaginians, however, are relentless. Cavalry charges break through the Roman lines, forcing them to shift their focus. And as the fighting intensifies, the Romans find themselves spread thin, their attention divided between the cavalry attacks and the steady pressure from the infantry. It is a desperate situation, but out of the corner of his eye, Hannibal spots an opportunity. The Roman left flank, weakened by the constant cavalry charges, is beginning to waver. With a nod to his cavalry commander, Hannibal begins to shift his troops, massing his forces on the right wing to create a bulge in his line. This is the classic pincer movement, a tactic that would become one of the hallmarks of his military career. The Romans, caught between the attacks from the front and the maneuvering from the flanks, are in a vice-like grip. As the Carthaginian infantry closes in, cutting off any hope of escape, the Romans realize the gravity of their situation. They are trapped, their backs to the river, with the relentless Hannibal closing in for the kill. Yet amidst the carnage, there is one figure who remains unfazed. Hannibal's younger brother, Hasdrubal. With keen observational skills, he notices that the Roman cavalry, though initially repelled, has reformed and is preparing for a counterattack. Understanding the potential threat, he quickly rallies the troops, focusing their attention on the resurgent Roman cavalry. This maneuver proves decisive, forcing the Romans to abandon their pursuit of the retreating infantry and instead focus on the cavalry. But the tide of battle has already turned. As darkness falls over the battlefield, the Romans are in full retreat, their ranks broken and their morale shattered. The Carthaginians, energized by their success, pursue them relentlessly, ensuring that none escape the carnage. By the end of the battle, the Roman losses are staggering. More than 40,000 soldiers lie dead or wounded on the battlefield, a stark reminder of the ferocity of the fighting. Even Hannibal's brother, Hasdrubal, perishes in the thick of the battle, struck down by a Roman sword. Hannibal, surveying the battlefield, knows that his victory at Cannae is a turning point in the war. But as he looks towards Rome, he understands that the road to the city will be long and arduous, that the seeds of doubt planted by Cannae will grow into full-blown fear in the coming years, chipping away at the confidence that had been Rome's cornerstone. The echo of Cannae will resonate throughout the ages, a reminder of the day Rome fell not by the might of a single blow, but by the genius of a master tactician. The aftermath of Cannae would see Rome take a back seat in the war, desperately trying to regroup while Hannibal's forces grew bolder,
Alps.
launching attacks that shook the very foundations of Roman power. But Hannibal's story does not end at Cannae. He would go on to become one of the most celebrated generals in history. His name synonymous with military brilliance and strategic innovation. But it is at Cannae that his star shone brightest, casting a shadow over Rome that would never truly fade. As Hannibal's army descended upon the unsuspecting Italian cities, it became clear that this was no ordinary force. These men, many barely out of their teens, had faced unimaginable hardships to get here. Their courage was tested at every turn, their endurance pushed to the breaking point. And yet they stood, battered but unbroken, ready to face the might of Rome. The Romans, caught in the web of Hannibal's genius, fell into traps of their own making. The famed Roman legions, confident in their discipline and strength, charged into battles they thought would be easy victories. But they soon realized that Hannibal's army was no pushover. The clash of arms, the roar of the crowds, the dust and sweat of battle filled the air as the Romans faced the disciplined, battle-hardened Carthaginians. Each engagement was a testament to Hannibal's strategic brilliance. The young general had transformed a group of ragtag soldiers into a force that could stand toe-to-toe with the mighty Roman legions. But the true horror of Hannibal's tactics became clear in the aftermath of these battles. The Carthaginians, with their guerrilla tactics and knowledge of the local terrain, were masters of hit and run. They struck with the precision of a viper and vanished before the Romans could regroup. Then came the psychological warfare, a tactic as old as time but used to devastating effect by Hannibal. When he captured a Roman outpost, he didn't just kill the soldiers. He made an example of them, leaving their corpses in gruesome displays to send a message to the next city. It was a message that cut deep, a message that shook the very foundations of Roman pride. In the face of this relentless enemy, the Romans faltered. The arrogance that had been their hallmark crumbled under the weight of defeat after defeat. Cities fell, provinces rebelled, and the vast Roman Empire began to crack. As the news of each victory reached Carthage, the people erupted in cheers. Hannibal had not just proven himself worthy of his father's legacy, he was surpassing it. The Second Punic War had become a story of David and Goliath, how a smaller, seemingly weaker force had managed to hold its ground against the most powerful empire of the known world. The spirit of Carthage, which Rome had thought extinguished, was burning brighter than ever. But as the war dragged on, the tide began to turn. The Roman Senate, desperate for a solution, turned to one of their most brilliant generals, Scipio Africanus. Young Scipio, eager to prove himself, devised a plan. Instead of trying to match Hannibal's brilliance head-on, he would strike at Carthage's allies. Slowly but surely, Scipio chipped away at Carthage's support, cutting off supplies and isolating the city. Back in Carthage, the situation grew dire. The war had drained their resources. The once proud citizens were now reduced to hoarding grain, rationing water, and selling their possessions to buy food. But Hannibal refused to surrender. He knew that to give up was to invite total destruction. As the final siege of Carthage began, Hannibal's brilliance shone through. Despite being outnumbered and surrounded, he held out as long as he could, but the strain was evident. The great general, once the pride of Carthage, was now a shadow of his former self, his eyes sunken, his clothes tattered. When the city finally fell, and Hannibal prepared to make his last stand, it was a sad end for a great warrior. Surrounded by a handful of loyal soldiers, he fought until his sword was broken. Even in defeat, he refused to surrender. And when the Romans finally overpowered him, it was not with a triumphant roar, but with a whisper of disbelief. They couldn't believe they had captured the legendary Hannibal alive. The tale of Hannibal Barca is a saga of courage, brilliance, and tragedy. His hatred for Rome, born out of necessity, grew into an obsession that drove him to greatness. He led his people through their darkest hours, proving that even against impossible odds, one man with a dream can make all the difference. As you stand in the ruins of Carthage, you can almost hear the echoes of his battles, the clash of arms, the cries of the dying, the roar of the crowds. The story of Hannibal is more than a legend. It's a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and determination can prevail. In the heart of Rome, the Grand Hall of the Senate resonates with the voices of power. Senators adorned in their finest robes discuss the latest reports brought in by couriers racing through the eternal city. Their voices echo with a sense of detachment, far from the battlefields where destinies are decided. Across the sea, in the rugged mountains of northern Italy, Hannibal's army battles not just the elements, but their own dwindling strength, if they press on, driven by a leader who refuses to accept defeat even when the odds seem insurmountable. With each passing day, Hannibal draws closer to the plains of Italy. His army a shadow of its former self, but his resolve undeterred. As we stand here, the spirit of those weary soldiers echoes around us. We hear the clang of their hammers reshaping the tools they carry, turning them into weapons of necessity. Each swing of the hammer beats down not just metal, but also their weariness and fear, forging them into a more determined and desperate band of warriors. It is a grim testament to their leaders' tenacity and the desperation of their situation. For many of these men, the journey has been as much a test of spirit as of endurance. They've crossed impassable mountains, fought relentless battles, and endured hardships that would break the will of lesser men. Yet they stand firm because they believe in their cause, in their leader, and perhaps most importantly, in themselves. Now, the trumpets blare, announcing the arrival of our legion. These men, these gladiators of Rome, are about to face off against the Carthaginian invaders. They march with a kind of confidence that only Rome's legions could muster. Their discipline and training, allowing them to function seamlessly as an instrument of the Roman war machine. Yet they are about to face an opponent unlike any they've ever encountered. A general who doesn't just follow rules, but breaks them and bends them to his will. And as we watch from the sidelines, we see the clash of two titans, Rome versus Carthage, legion versus war elephant, discipline versus unbridled aggression. It's a scene of such magnitude that it seems like the very gods are watching. The dust settles and we find ourselves amidst the aftermath of a battle that was not just a clash of armies, but a collision of strategies. On one side stands Hannibal, his weathered face a testament to the battles he's fought. Not just on the battlefield, but in the corridors of power in Rome. In his eyes, however, there's no trace of fatigue, only the burning resolve of a man who refuses to accept defeat. Opposite him stands the Roman general, Gaius Flaminius, his armor dented, his expression grim. The battle has taken its toll on both sides, but the Romans, with their disciplined ranks and superior numbers, should have the advantage. But as Flaminius surveys the battlefield, he sees something that chills him to the bone. The Carthaginians are regrouping, readying themselves for another charge. Their battle formation, though shaken, is holding, a testament to Hannibal's battle tactics. And then the elephants, those behemoths from distant lands, trumpet their defiance. Their tusks dripping with the blood of battle. Flaminius realizes that he's facing an enemy like no other, a force that not only threatens Rome's dominance, but its very existence. The coming battle will be more than a test of arms. It will be a clash of civilizations, a confrontation that will redefine the rules of war itself. Flaminius, bound by duty and honor, musters his forces. The Romans, with their short swords and oval shields, advance, their ranks unbroken, their faces set in grim determination. They are the pride of Rome, and they're about to face the fury of Carthage. As the two armies prepare to meet, the air is thick with tension. The fate of nations hangs in the balance, poised on the edge of steel and strategy. For Rome, this is more than just a battle. It's a war of survival. Cannae was a disaster for the Romans. Their army was encircled, decimated, destroyed. And Hannibal's reputation as a brilliant tactician grew. The Carthaginians had won against all odds. It was a stunning victory, but it didn't bring Hannibal closer to his ultimate goal. In fact, it did quite the opposite. You see, Hannibal's goal wasn't just to win battles. That was never enough for him. No, his goal was to break the Roman spirit, to make them surrender their entire empire. He wanted to do to Rome what no one had done before, and for that, he needed another victory, one that would devastate Rome like nothing else, one that would shatter their belief in their own invincibility. And Hannibal knew exactly how to do that. He had studied the Romans, their psychology, their tactics, their weaknesses, and he had found the perfect way to destroy them. But before he could execute his plan, he had to wait. He had to bide his time. The Romans were regrouping, recovering from their defeat at Cannae. They were sending more troops to Italy, more generals, more experienced commanders, and Hannibal knew he had to be patient. Couldn't afford to make a move before they were ready. He needed them at their strongest, most confident, most arrogant. Because when the time was right, when the Romans were at their peak, that's when he would strike. And strike he did. The Romans were indeed at their strongest under the command of two consuls, Lucius Aemilius, Paulus, and his colleague, Gaius Terentius Varro. They had assembled an army of nearly 80,000 men, nearly 8 times the size of Hannibal's force. The Roman legions were marching toward Cannae, where they believed they would finally crush the Carthaginian threat once and for all. But they had no idea what was waiting for them there. The Romans were led by arrogance, by the belief that numbers alone could secure them victory. They didn't understand the land, the terrain, the weather, or the enemy they were facing. When Hannibal met the Romans at Cannae, he knew he had them right where he wanted them. The ground was narrow, hemmed in by rivers and hills. The Romans would be forced to fight in tight, confined spaces, and that was exactly where Hannibal's strength lay. The Carthaginian cavalry was positioned on the wings, ready to strike when the moment came. The infantry stood firm, prepared to create the illusion of retreat, to lure the Romans into a sense of victory. But it was all part of the plan. As the Roman army approached, Hannibal's men fell back, giving the impression of a retreating army. The Romans, eager for victory, eager to atone for their previous defeats, pursued Hannibal's army into the narrow pass. They had taken the bait. Now, Hannibal's cavalry struck, enveloping the Romans from the flanks. The infantry stood firm, holding their ground until the Roman center was completely surrounded. The trap was sprung. The Romans were trapped in a narrow corridor, hemmed in by hills and rivers, their escape cut off by Hannibal's cavalry. They were trapped, and they were about to be destroyed. But this story is not just about military tactics or strategic brilliance. It's about the clash of two empires, two cultures, two ways of life. It's about the struggle between East and West, between tradition and innovation, between despotism and democracy. The Carthaginians may have lost the battle, but they won something much more valuable. They won respect, admiration, and perhaps even friendship. Some historians argue that Hannibal Barca was a great general, a brilliant strategist, a master of deception. But I say he was more than that. He was a symbol of resistance against tyranny, a beacon of hope in a dark time. He was the warrior poet, the philosopher king, the embodiment of the human spirit. So who really won at Cannae? Was it the Romans with their massive army and their advanced technology? Or was it the Carthaginians with their cunning tactics and their indomitable spirit? I'll let you be the judge. But one thing is for sure. Cannae was not just a battle. It was a clash of civilizations. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. August 2nd, 216 BC. A date that will live on in infamy. The day Rome's arrogance met its match at the Battle of Cannae. Today we delve into the heart of this ancient conflict. Story of military genius and human fallibility that has echoed through the corridors of history. Our story begins in the shadow of a scorching sun. The Roman legions, nearly 80,000 strong, are arrayed in their customary battle formation. The highly trained and disciplined legionaries stand shoulder to shoulder, their shields forming a wall of overlapping bronze, their swords and spears poised for action. Under the blazing sun, they appear invincible, or so they think. But unbeknownst to them, they are about to face an opponent whose strategic mind is far more brilliant than any Roman general of their time. Across the battlefield, the Carthaginian army, numbering around 50,000, awaits the Roman onslaught. Hannibal's troops are positioned in a crescent shape, intentionally leaving their center exposed. What the Romans saw was a seemingly vulnerable core and flanks made up of lightly armed troops, a setup that appeared to invite attack. Little did they know, they were walking straight into a meticulously laid trap. Hannibal's plan was as audacious as it was brilliant. His light infantry would draw the Romans into the center, allowing his heavy infantry to rest and prepare. Then, when the time was just right, his cavalry would sweep in from the flanks, trapping the Romans in a vice-like grip. It was a battle plan so cunning, so perfectly executed, that it would forever change the course of military history. The Romans, led by the experienced generals Paulus and Varro, charged forward with confidence bordering on arrogance. The heavy infantry smashed into Hannibal's center, just as he had predicted. His troops gave ground, retreating steadily, methodically, always maintaining their formation. The Romans, their initial shock carrying them forward, pressed their attack, unaware that they were slipping deeper and deeper into the abyss of Hannibal's design. It was a masterful display of military deception. The Romans, intoxicated by their early success, poured into the gap in Hannibal's lines, each step taking them further into the heart of the trap. But traps, like life, are rarely noticed until it's too late. And so it was for the Romans. As the Carthaginians fell back, their cavalry on the flanks began a slow, deliberate movement. A subtle shift in position that went unnoticed by the Romans, or if noticed, was dismissed as irrelevant. But as the cavalry closed in, the reality of their situation became glaringly obvious. They were surrounded. The Roman lines, once so proud, so unwavering, began to buckle under the pressure. The disciplined ranks became a jumbled mass of men and machines, the clash of steel on steel echoing across the plain. The Romans fought with the desperation of men who realized too late the gravity of their error. They were trapped in a kill zone of Hannibal's making, and the odds were stacked against them. The Carthaginian cavalry, with its sweeping charges, added to the cacophony of the battlefield. Their horses thundering across the ground, their lances flashing like silver serpents, they tore into the Roman flanks, dealing death and disarray. The infantry, patient and precise, hammered away at the Romans, forcing them back, inch by bloody inch. The skilled Roman commanders, including Varro, attempted to rally their troops to instill some semblance of order into the chaos, but it was a losing battle. The trap had sprung, and there was no escaping its deadly embrace. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the Roman resistance all but crumbled. The once proud legions were broken, scattered, or cut to pieces. Those who survived the initial onslaught were picked off by the relentless Carthaginian cavalry. The Battle of Cannae was a masterpiece of military strategy, a testament to Hannibal's genius as a tactician. Yet it was also a study in Roman hubris, a reminder that even the mightiest of armies could fall prey to the most cunning of strategies. The aftermath was devastating. It is estimated that nearly 70,000 Roman soldiers lost their lives at Cannae, a casualty rate that shook the very foundations of Rome. The defeat was so severe that it left Rome on the brink of collapse, forcing them to seek an uneasy peace with Carthage. But in the annals of history, the true victory belonged to Hannibal. At Cannae, he had triumphed not just over Rome, but over their arrogance, their pride, their belief in their own invincibility. The echoes of this victory reverberated through the ages, serving as a beacon of strategic brilliance for centuries to come. And that, dear fellow scholars, brings us to the end of our journey into the heart of the Battle of Cannae. If you found this account insightful, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement is the fuel that drives our journey through time. Thanks for watching. But enough about my video. Let's get to what you really want to hear about, shall we? That's right. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering a free trial, one free book with any annual subscription. And now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Let us return to the Italian peninsula and pick up the pieces of Rome's shattered army. It's been 3 years since the Battle of Cannae, and Rome has yet to recover. The news of their catastrophic loss there continues to reverberate throughout the peninsula. Their allies, though, do not yet believe it possible that Rome, the seemingly invincible republic, can be defeated. However, they do begin to question Rome's leadership, especially after hearing of how badly their legions were mauled at Cannae. Many allies start to wonder if perhaps Rome is not as strong as they had believed, and maybe they had been better off siding with Carthage. Other Italian states begin to make moves, sensing weakness in Rome. It seems the entire Italian peninsula is beginning to fall apart at the seams. Just as Rome's allies begin to waver, Hannibal decides to push his advantage. He advances into central Italy, hoping to deliver another devastating blow to Rome and finally end their resistance. Once again, Hannibal's army proves to be superior, winning several engagements against the disorganized Romans. But each victory takes its toll on his already stretched supply lines. With every mile his army advances deeper into enemy territory, the pressure on his logistics increases. Hannibal is aware that if he pushes too far, he risks losing the very advantage that made him famous at Cannes. So Hannibal makes a decision that will shock Carthage. He sends messengers to Carthage requesting additional resources and, most importantly, asking for permission to lay siege to Rome. But as Hannibal pushes towards Rome, he faces an unexpected challenge. The Italian allies of Rome, who up until now had mostly stayed out of the conflict, begin to mobilize. They rally to Rome's side, forming a loose alliance against the Carthaginians. The situation has changed drastically from what Hannibal had anticipated. What was supposed to be a campaign to crush Rome has turned into a war of attrition against a united Italy. Hannibal, trapped between the advancing Romans and the unforgiving terrain of Italy, is forced to adapt. Despite his tactical brilliance at Cannae, he now finds himself bogged down in a war that he might not be able to win. The question is, can Hannibal, the master tactician, turn the tide of this war, or will he be undone by the very forces that made him famous? Only time will tell. As the war grinds on, the strain on Hannibal is immense. The war in Italy, far from being the quick campaign he envisioned, has become a brutal test of wills. The Carthaginian war chest, once brimming with the riches of a Mediterranean empire, is now noticeably lighter. The cost of maintaining an army in hostile territory is immense. Supplies dwindle and reinforcements from Carthage, though they come, are not as substantial as Hannibal would like. At the same time, the spirit of his troops is not what it once was. The early victories against Rome have given way to a stalemate, with the Romans refusing to give up. Many of Hannibal's soldiers, veterans of many campaigns, start to dream of home. In the camps of the Carthaginians, whispers of doubt begin to arise. Some start to question Hannibal's strategies. Others openly complain about the lack of supplies and the seemingly endless war. And then there are those who simply long for the safety of Carthage, for the familiar streets and the comforting sounds of their native tongue. The war in Italy, which began as a glorious campaign, has taken on a different tone. Now it's a war of attrition, a battle of endurance. We're here to talk about the Battle of Cannae, one of the greatest battles in ancient history. The year is 216 BC. The place, the banks of the river, Agon near Cannae in Apulia. Here, Hannibal Barca's name became a synonym for military genius, crushing the Roman legions in one of the most decisive battles in ancient history. Yet the story doesn't end here. Years have passed since the devastation of Cannae. The Carthaginian victory on the fields of Apulia has not brought Hannibal the final triumph he sought. The Romans, though deeply scarred, have not been broken. What once seemed like an unstoppable juggernaut now appears to be a mere shadow of its former self. But the Romans are not the easy prey Hannibal may have anticipated. In the aftermath of the battle, Rome undergoes a profound transformation. They have been humbled, but they have learned, and the lessons of Cannae begin to take root. Slowly, methodically, they rebuild their strength, not through a single overwhelming assault, but through a relentless, unyielding determination. While Hannibal's victories in Italy have been numerous, the strategic situation grows more complex with every passing month. His army, though still formidable, begins to feel the strain of prolonged campaigning in hostile territory. Supplies are scarce, and his men, though loyal, grow weary. The cold, hard reality of war begins to take its toll, even as Hannibal's brilliant tactics continue to outmaneuver the Roman generals. The pressure of keeping a foreign army fed, supplied, and ready for battle weighs heavily on his shoulders. The logistical difficulties of maintaining his campaign deep in Italy, far from Carthage's support, become insurmountable. With each passing day, Hannibal's once unstoppable momentum begins to slow. Rome, on the other hand, adapts. The Fabian strategy, which had been scoffed at by many, begins to bear fruit. By avoiding direct confrontations and forcing Hannibal to fight on multiple fronts, the Romans are slowly regaining their footing. Over time, the pressure on Hannibal mounts. His forces, though skilled and experienced, are drawn thinner by the constant Roman harassment, their morale faltering as they face longer periods without decisive victories. The Romans, although defeated at Cannae, have regained their confidence, and this shift in momentum is now visible across the battlefield. Meanwhile, back in Carthage, the political climate is growing uncertain. The Carthaginian Senate, while still supporting Hannibal's campaign, begins to lose faith in his ability to secure a final victory. Carthage is stretched thin, with its empire across the Mediterranean in disarray. The resources required to sustain Hannibal's army are increasingly difficult to come by, and the Senate's patience is wearing thin. There is talk of withdrawing support, of abandoning the costly war in Italy in favor of more pressing concerns elsewhere. Hannibal, now separated from the very people he fought for, finds himself trapped in a situation where, despite his tactical brilliance, he is growing increasingly isolated. But it is in this moment of isolation that a new opportunity arises, one that will eventually bring Hannibal into a fateful confrontation with Rome. On the horizon, a new Roman general begins to make waves. Scipio Africanus, young, ambitious, and immensely talented, rises through the ranks with a reputation for both tactical genius and unwavering resolve. He has studied Hannibal's every move, learning from Rome's earlier mistakes. Scipio sees what no one else does, that Hannibal's real weakness lies not in his army, but in his isolation. By cutting off his supplies and reinforcing his own forces, Scipio believes he can break the back of Hannibal's campaign. In the year 205 BC, Scipio lands in Africa in the heart of Carthaginian territory. His objective is clear: to take the war to Carthage itself, to strike at the very heart of Hannibal's power. The Carthaginian Senate, already divided, watches in horror as their defenses begin to buckle under the pressure of Scipio's campaign. Hannibal, still far from home, must now make a choice. The pressure mounts, and the Carthaginian general is forced to return to defend his homeland, abandoning his long-held campaign in Italy. The decision is a painful one for Hannibal. He knows that Rome's final offensive in Africa could very well end the war in Carthage's defeat, and with it, his own legacy. His hopes of forcing a peace by devastating Rome on its home soil are dashed. Instead, the focus shifts from the bloodied fields of Italy to the plains of North Africa, where Hannibal will face Scipio Africanus in a final confrontation that will decide the fate of the Punic Wars. So ends yet another edition of our channel. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to show your support. Carthage, once a colossus on the Mediterranean, now trembles on the brink of annihilation. Its mighty war machine, which had stretched from Spain to North Africa, is reduced to a skeleton of its former self. The Punic Wars, a series of conflicts that had raged for nearly 2 centuries, have come down to this final confrontation. Hannibal Barca, the brilliant general who had stunned Rome by crossing the Alps with elephants and had lured them into a decisive defeat at Cannae, is preparing for his last stand. The die is cast. The legions of Rome, led by the steady and calculating Scipio Africanus, have crossed the sea to conquer Africa itself. They march across the barren plains of Zama with a single purpose. Hannibal, aware that his options are dwindling, knows that he must deliver a knockout blow to Scipio before it's too late. Yet even in this dire situation, Hannibal's mind is sharp, his spirit unbroken. He surveys the landscape, choosing a battlefield where he can make maximum use of his strengths. The year is 200 BC, and the setting sun casts long shadows on the plains of Zama as the two armies prepare to clash. Hannibal, with his elite troops, is ready to strike. His plan is audacious, relying on the speed and agility of his cavalry and the shock tactics of his war elephants. He hopes to outmaneuver Scipio, confusing the Roman general as he did at Cannae. However, Scipio is no ordinary general, and having studied Hannibal's tactics and the mistakes made by his predecessors, he has prepared for this moment for years. He knows that Hannibal's cavalry is key to his strategy, and that the war elephants can turn the tide of battle if given the chance. So as Hannibal's forces surge forward, Scipio holds his ground, his legions forming a tight, unbreakable wall. As the battle rages, Hannibal's elephants thunder into the fray, their tusks flashing in the sunlight. But Scipio is ready. He has ordered gaps to be left in the first ranks of his legions. And as the elephants charge, they pass straight through these openings harmlessly. It is a bold move, one that catches Hannibal off guard. Detachments of Roman cavalry then ride out to flank the pachyderms, spearing the exposed sides of the beasts, which begin to panic, trampling their own infantry as they flee the battlefield. Without their cavalry screen, Hannibal's infantry are exposed to the disciplined Roman legions. Slowly, but surely, Scipio's forces close in, pushing Hannibal's troops back. The Carthaginian general, seeing his carefully laid plans crumble, is forced to commit his reserves early. As the battle reaches its climax, Hannibal sends his elite troops, the very best of his army, into the fray. For a moment, it seems as if he might pull off a victory. But Scipio, cool and collected, refuses to buckle. He counters Hannibal's every move, his legions adapting to the changing tides of battle. The arrival of Numidian cavalry under the command of Massinissa, a former ally of Hannibal's who has now switched sides, proves decisive. These light horsemen harass Hannibal's cavalry, preventing them from maneuvering and striking effectively. The cavalry battle becomes a disaster for the Carthaginians. In the end, the Battle of Zama is a resounding victory for Scipio in Rome. Hannibal's forces, though valiant, are defeated. The once proud general, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, is forced to watch as his dreams of empire collapse around him. As the sun sets on the battlefield of Zama, the victors prepare to claim their prize. Scipio, surveying the carnage, knows that this victory is more than a triumph on the battlefield. It is the death knell of Carthage, the end of an era. Hannibal, his head bowed in defeat, is a shadow of the brilliant general who had once struck terror into the hearts of Rome. The Punic Wars are over, and Rome is the undisputed mistress of the Mediterranean. The story of Hannibal Barca, the brilliant Carthaginian general who defied the odds and challenged the might of Rome, has echoed through the ages. From his daring crossing of the Alps to his stunning victory at Cannae, Hannibal's name has become synonymous with military genius, when his legacy is more than just a string of victories. Hannibal represents a spirit of defiance, a refusal to bow before seemingly insurmountable odds. His story serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and resilience can prevail. And although his final defeat at the Battle of Zama marked the end of an era, his legend continues to live on, inspiring generations to come. The dust of the battlefield settles, and with it, the hopes of a nation fade into history. Carthage, once the dominant power of the Mediterranean, lies defeated. Hannibal Barca, the brilliant general who had humiliated Rome on the plains of Cannae, has finally been bested at Zama. It is a bitter end to a story that had once seemed destined for a very different conclusion. But despite his defeat, Hannibal's legacy is far from being consigned to the annals of history. His tactical genius, his audacity, and his indomitable will to fight have left an indelible mark on military history, one that continues to inspire generals, tacticians, and leaders to this day. In the aftermath of Zama, Carthage is forced to make peace with Rome. The terms are harsh. The Carthaginian Empire is reduced to a shadow of its former self, its military power severely limited. Yet even as Carthage bows to the might of Rome, the figure of Hannibal Barca stands as a testament to what a single individual can achieve against overwhelming odds. His campaign against Rome is one of the most audacious and brilliant in military history. He is remembered not for the war he lost, but for the incredible victories he achieved, for his unparalleled ability to outthink his opponents, and for his willingness to take risks that others would deem unthinkable. But what of the Romans? The Battle of Cannae, once their darkest hour, became the catalyst for a transformation. It was in the wake of this crushing defeat that Rome learned the true meaning of resilience. They adapted, they evolved, and they found a way to continue fighting. The Romans, who had once believed themselves invincible, now understood that victory was not guaranteed by sheer strength alone. Rome's eventual triumph over Hannibal would not have been possible without their ability to learn from their mistakes and grow stronger from the pain of their defeats. Rome, even in its most glorious moments, never forgot the lessons learned in the shadow of defeat. The discipline, innovation, and strategic brilliance that marked Rome's rise to power were forged in the fires of adversity. The early Roman legions, often overlooked in the grand narrative of Rome's military success, were the crucible in which the ideals of Roman military organization and tactics were refined. Their victories, while significant, were hard-won, each a testament to the adaptability and tenacity of Rome's early leaders. These early victories were not merely military triumphs. They were foundational moments in shaping the Roman military ethos, an ethos that would become the bedrock of Rome's future conquests. The victories of the early Republic, though overshadowed by the later glories of Rome's legions, played a pivotal role in laying the groundwork for the military dominance that would characterize the empire. The strategies employed and the lessons learned during these early campaigns were the building blocks that would later be assembled into the sophisticated military machine that defeated Hannibal. Early Rome, far from being a prelude to the grandeur of the empire, was a period of growth, adaptation, and learning. It was in these nascent stages that Rome's military identity was born, an identity that would evolve, adapt, and ultimately conquer. Rome's early victories, while seemingly disparate, were part of a continuous process of growth and learning. Each engagement, whether against a local tribe or a neighboring state, contributed to the evolution of Roman tactics, strategy, and logistics. This gradual process of improvement ensured that Rome was not merely reacting to external threats, but was actively shaping itself into a formidable military power. Rome's early victories were not a straight path to success. They were hard-fought battles marked by setbacks, defeats, and moments of doubt. It was in overcoming these challenges that the true character of early Rome was forged. The ability to learn from setbacks, to adapt and innovate in the face of adversity, was the hallmark of Rome's early military successes. This capacity for growth and change would later become a defining feature of Rome's military ethos,
allowing them to not only survive but thrive in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
As we reflect on Rome's early victories, we must recognize that they were not just about territorial gains or military tactics. They were about the birth of a military culture, a culture that valued discipline, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. This legacy of military achievement laid the foundation for the victories that would come later. Victories that would ultimately make Rome a household name in the annals of history. The story of Hannibal Barca is one of the most gripping tales of courage, ambition, and ultimately tragedy. His life serves as a stark reminder that even the greatest of men can be felled by the relentless march of fate. Born into a world of politics and war, Hannibal's destiny was shaped by the ambitions of his father, Hannibal Barca. From a young age, he was indoctrinated into the military mindset, learning the arts of war and strategy that would later make him famous. Hannibal's brilliance as a military commander is a matter of historical record. His victories at the Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and the very heart of Italy at Cannae were nothing short of legendary. He led his troops with unmatched audacity and tactical genius, confounding his enemies and captivating the imagination of the ancient world. But despite his many triumphs, fate had a cruel twist in store for him. The weight of his responsibilities, the pressure to win, and perhaps the very scope of his ambitions proved to be his undoing. As his campaigns dragged on, Hannibal's resources dwindled, and the support he so desperately needed failed to materialize. Despite this, he soldiered on, his indomitable spirit unbroken. But even the most valiant efforts cannot overcome the relentless grip of fate. In the end, Hannibal's brilliance was not enough to secure his place in history as a triumphant hero. Instead, his story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the brightest stars can fall. His defeat at Zama was a devastating blow, marking the end of his illustrious career and the beginning of his nation's decline. Despite this tragic end, Hannibal's legacy lives on. His name has become synonymous with military genius, and his tactics continue to be studied by military minds around the world. The Battle of Cannae in particular has become a case study in military strategy, a testament to Hannibal's tactical brilliance. Hannibal Barca's story is a tragic one, but it is also one of immense human drama. It is a story that speaks to the complexities of ambition, the burdens of leadership, and the capricious nature of fate.